There are many things that concern people nowadays about what is happening to the planet. At some level, whether it's climate crisis or poverty, education or gender, biodiversity loss or the warming of our oceans, somewhere along the line we have to say, what kind of leadership got us to where we are today? And if we can understand that, ask ourselves, what kind of leadership will move us into tomorrow?
Will get us into the future. Welcome, everyone. And we're going to ask you all to turn your cameras on. This is a camera on session. So if we can get everyone on screen who's joining the call to we are all hardwired to connect. You may be interested to know that the human vocal cords, even as I speak and I create a sound for you, is a harmonic, a coming together of a series of blended sounds. Seeing each other's faces is how we know we're friend. Having your cameras off creates uncertainty. This is a session to be part of, and we're going to make sure that it is, to the best of our ability, in 1 hour only, a collaboration. Welcome, everybody. I'm Fabienne Datner, and it's a great privilege to see so many of you here today and to acknowledge the hundreds of people who've registered for a recording of the session. I'm going to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. I'm on Wurundjeri territory, and I invite you to acknowledge the territory that you're on, or the ancestors that you recognise in the land that you're on in the chat room. I acknowledge leaders past, present and emerging, but I also bring to this conversation a sense of us being in a circle. There is so much about the solutions that we need in our world today that are common sense. Unfortunately, they're not common practice. So I acknowledge traditional owners for the wisdom that for tens of thousands of years, certainly in Australia, they brought to the management of the land, and an acknowledgement that in 300 years, we've managed to do such appalling damage, which that short video up front showed us. And so I'm constantly saying, if we can acknowledge what practice of leadership got us to where we are today, we have to be able to acknowledge what practice of leadership will take us into the future that we all want. So I acknowledge the traditional owners. I acknowledge you, the audience. It's such a privilege to have you here, and so many people who I recognise and know and have come to love and consider friend. There are councils, senior leaders from councils, accounting profession, education, TAFE and universities. The care and disability sectors are well represented. Government, HRDs, CEOs, directors, coaches, people running their own organisations or private practices. I welcome you all to this conversation, the start of 3 pieces we will share with you and why we think it's so important for us to collaborate. I have a childish pleasure in seeing someone whose ship I've commissioned 3 times to Antarctica, Ute Bowen. Ute, I'm beyond delighted to see you on screen. There is a childish pleasure in knowing that you're here. As we have fought together with a lot of people on screen to create a world that we can inherit with joy rather than a world that we step into fearfully. And I'm going to ask everyone coming on to turn on your cameras, please. This is an open camera session. We want to see your faces. And a part of the acknowledgement is, I don't care if you're eating. I don't care if you're wearing Ugg boots. I don't care if you're in bed. I don't care if a cat walks across the screen and shows us its bottom. Hands up who've had that experience during COVID with cats galore. Hands up. There have to have been, yeah. I don't care if your dog barks, the door bangs. I don't care if somebody walks behind you. I care that we see each other and talk to each other, because this is going to be the way that we will create trust and safety, whether we like it or not. Our artistry and care for online communication is pivotal to how we will craft the next decade. So as your host for this conversation, I have an opinion and I will share my opinion with you. I hope that you have an opinion and will share yours with the group. As we have this conversation about out of the woods and how we manage this very complex return to work, which isn't working, as we talk about the things that we've seen and are trialing where it's working and not working, our promise to you is that we will synthesize this conversation and send it back to you. And it will form the backbone of a second conversation in August, which will be the cumulative backbone to a third conversation in September. We think it's crucially important for leaders at all levels to be collaborating. So whilst I host this session, I don't presume to have the answers. That would be an insult to everyone who's joined the conversation. I will give you what I think are practical suggestions, but each one of you has to put it into context. I'm first and foremost a social entrepreneur. So I am interested in doing things differently, bringing elements together that have not been put together previously. Some of you may know of the global initiative Homeward Bound projects, where we brought together science, women, care for the planet, and leadership, all framed by Antarctica. Some of you will know us for the core work that we do in DATNA Group, and a focus on true connection to values, purpose, and helping leaders know that once you articulate strategy, you've merely started the strategic journey, not finished it. If there's no governance, execution, measurement, no engagement of people, it's just paper. We help people on coaching. We help people on elevating the visibility of women in our world today. I'm a leadership activist, so our company carries 60 different diagnostic tools to understand how and why human beings do life the way they do. We choose bespoke processes for people, place, and organisation. But I describe myself as an activist because I believe that the practice of leadership and the way we're running organisations is in the middle of the biggest upheaval in 1,000 years. The hierarchical, more military model of leadership is not going to work in a world changing at the speed we will be dealing with it. Anyone who's done any resilience work in community knows, if you are making science-based decisions, that we are now looking to a decade of multiple critical events happening concurrently. Leadership sits at the centre now of a series of interactions. So I'm a leadership specialist at a group of leadership specialists, but we're also activists. We support promoting women because we think women may be one of the most important sustainability contributions we have. They're more inclined to be legacy-minded, collaborative, inclusive. We don't know if that's bred in the bone or if it's acquired. We just know that is an attribute we see and research supports. And for anyone's ambiguity around this, the pendulum has been over on the far left-hand side of the parabola, and to swing it to the middle is not possible. Pendulums don't swing to a middle. They have to go through a period of building equilibrium, and we think we have to overvalue women for a period of time so that we start to find a blended approach to leadership that has no gender, that is truly intersectional. I'm a mother of 4 kids, 2 from my first marriage and 2 from my first husband's second marriage. I'm a pet owner. I have 2 cats and 2 dogs, and my cats are indoor cats. I'm about to go on holiday for 5 weeks, having not had a holiday in nearly 7 years. That is very poor role modelling on my part, but I traded my holidays off for 4 years in Antarctica. So welcome to the conversation out of the woods. And there are 3 things we're going to look at today. we're going to look at what is happening with team dynamics. What do you see happening? What do we see happening? Why teams? Because it's the smallest number we get to where human beings can belong. And human beings need to belong now more than ever. The risk of not belonging is we're divisive, we're critical, we undermine each other, we find fault with each other, and we judge. The second thing we're going to have a look at is, what does collaboration in this world look like right now, where we need this skill at a premium, but we're so divided. We're so separated. Some people are coming to work, some people aren't. Senior executives want people to come back to work. People don't want to come back to work. Just yesterday, I was talking to a very large engineering firm, and their return to work is currently sitting at about 9%. They want it to be a lot more. People don't want to come back to work. They've discovered that they can do their jobs effectively from home. And once you've learned that, who wants to travel to a city office and waste anything from 2 to 3 hours getting to and from an office where you could actually do your job effectively from home? The third element we're going to look at in a brave way between us all is the practice of leadership. What are the capabilities we think and feel leaders need to demonstrate in order to embrace the opportunities that this strange, volatile and uncertain world is bringing to our table? So before we begin, we are going to break you out into rooms of 5. And we want everyone who's here to have at least 4 other people you meet and know in this now growing audience, because this is our shared challenge and it's not going away. COVID is not going away. You know that, I know that. Science has been telling us for over 50 years exactly what would happen to our planet, and we haven't been listening. And now it's happening. The only difference is it's happening at an accelerated pace. I have a great sense of optimism that human beings and the science that guides will pull us back from the brink, but not if we don't talk and collaborate. This is a room of leaders. Enjoy 5 minutes of meeting the leaders in the room. Your challenge is to exchange contacts. That's all you have to do. Say hello and make sure you have emails and telephone numbers of at least the 4 people that you share the room with. That's all you have to do. Thanks, Hannah. On as you come back.
Being recorded.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you got to meet some people that you were surprised and or delighted to meet. Hands up if you met some people that it was a pleasure to meet or you were actually quite surprised. Who's here? Yeah, me too. Me too, in one room. Okay, I'm going to give you maybe 10 minutes of my perspective, but we're then going to ask you a series of questions. And the floor will be open to both a speaker from the floor and to the chat room. And the first thing I want to say on the narrative of this session is why we're doing this. We have in the last 7 years spent a lot of time with and invested in globally a very big conversation with scientists around the planet. The forecast for the next decade is not pretty, number one. So if we're going to continue to be in a very volatile and unstable environment, then our capacity to listen, actively listen and hear back different perspectives and synthesize those different perspectives is getting more and more important. But we are observing that listening skills are worse and worse. They're getting worse because people are so task-oriented. They're rushing to problem solution, problem solution, problem solution. But the problem is they're not solving the right problem. They're not listening long enough to understand the perspective of other people or the needs of other people. There is a fear and anxiety underpinning listening, which we think needs to be challenged. We think it's crucially important, and our gift to you is curating your answers, finding a synthesis to what you say to see if there is over some 200 people who've joined this conversation, a recommendation we can all buy into, not just the gospel according to Fabian. But let me give you some headlines to give you some thought starters. I'm going to say common sense is not common practice. We have promoted I over we. We have promoted individuals and hyperachievement, and what I can do, I make, I own, I have at the expense of us. This is not attributable to an individual, but it is an acknowledgement of how we're approaching the world that we are in. I just come back from a very big event in Sweden, in Helsingborg, where over 1,500 councils from across Europe came together to share best practice around sustainability and innovation. And in that space, and I saw how much we're not spending time together and innovating and creating. In this space, common sense is on the back burner. But what it looks like when we come together is the wisdom of the crowd. It is not about what I know. It is about listening and what we know, and starting at the right level with the people you're working with, whether it's a team, an individual, an organisation, a community, a university. The conversation has to start at the right level.
Have we lost Fabian?
That is a hard pill to swallow.
We lost you, Fabian, for a second or two.
Thank you, Pamela. It's a hard pill to swallow, the notion that
Looks like it might be unstable, Fabes.
Yeah.
I'm going to swap internets. Hold, bear with me, everybody. It's Murphy's Law.
It's all these people using the internet. How dare they?
There you go. I'm back again. How's that, Simon? That's good? Good. Thank you.
Really good,
So-
Fabian. We can hear you and see you.
Wonderful. So the risk is this is quite a hard message for very senior leaders to hear, myself included, but we do need to listen very differently, and we have to manage our own fear of judgment and not knowing. Common sense is not common practice. Second thing is we have talked agile planning and management for a very long time. I'm not sure everyone understands what it actually means. Agile management is the embodiment of our ability to listen. It's an incremental and iterative process. It assumes the wisdom of the people tasked with implementing is layered and acquired. Resilient cultures have to be strategically clear. Now, on the narrative of strategy, organisations are deeply unclear around strategy. They have it in a document, but we do not cascade it. We do not measure it appropriately. We do not give ownership to people at the coalface. Planning of strategy and its translation into operations has to be owned by the people, with the people, for the people. If it stays in the hands of leaders, as McKinsey, Deloitte, or in fact founders of modern strategy mapping, Kaplan and Norton will say 65 to 90% of strategies will fail, not because they're not good, but because they are not well thought through, nor engaged, nor governed, nor executed, nor measured. Resilient cultures are going to be connected, deeply connected to purpose and values. I've seen some phenomenal examples of this, and I've seen some terrible ones. You can't fake connection to purpose. Purpose is ultimately, in one sentence, passion for the task you've committed to. Passion for the task you've committed to. It's not fluffy. It's an intense commitment to what we are here to achieve. And in a passion for task, all people stand aside and say, am I invested in the task? Values. Values are not on a piece of paper. They're not on a wall chart. They're not on the back of a business card. They are an embodied, lived practice. They can only be measured in behaviour. If you have not translated values into behaviour, then your values are not working for you. Unconscious values will dominate people's thinking. We have to be emotionally capable, resilient. We have to understand what emotional intelligence actually is. And if you want to write down something interesting, write down these 4 letters, R, U, U, M. We have to be able to recognise emotion in ourselves and others. We have to be able to use what we see. We are constantly overriding emotional data for intellectual data, and we are miscuing the people that we are with. We have to be able to recognise emotions in ourselves and others and use it. We have to cognitively understand the place of emotions in human interactions. Emotions are in the driving seat. Reasoning is a passenger who periodically shouts at emotion to try and steer the car. We must create psychological safety. Psychological safety is going to be the single biggest challenge we have in the next decade, because human beings no longer feel safe. They don't feel safe with their leaders. They don't trust them often. We don't feel that we can say the things we really feel. I had a group of executives here 48 hours ago in a private retreat, 9 senior leaders in a very high-profile government department. We started the day, we were talking about the team's dynamic, which is good. It's not great, but it's good. And within 10 minutes of being in a facilitated space, in a safe environment, where they were invited to say, well, so how are you really feeling? Out comes the fear, the anxiety, the doubt, the exhaustion, the overwhelm. The sense of what COVID has actually cost us, the disconnection from people, the desire to be together, and the frustration around getting together. Overwhelm was evident in every single person, bar one, a 30-year-old leader, the youngest of the executive by far, who said, look, in the end, I see this as a learning opportunity. And this is about my contribution to an organisation, not what I feel. And I thought to myself, something my father used to say to me, out of the mouths of babes and sucklings comes the truth. You have to understand what well-being is, and you need to measure it, not pass it over to the psychologists who help, but own it as people. How do we build authentic relationships? How do we create meaning, purpose, and direction? How do we create flexibility and calmness? How do we find and generate vitality and energy? How do we create balance and boundaries? The first thing I'm going to say to everyone in this context is you cannot afford to have cameras off online. Our cameras must be on. If we cannot see each other's faces, we do not trust each other. And you can say that you are just listening, but the audience doesn't feel that because they can't see you. Cameras on is how we find each other. And we're going to be doing more and more and more online. It is not reverting to the way we are. And we have to get used to turning our cameras on and eating, turning our cameras on and breastfeeding, turning our cameras on when we're not feeling great, turning our cameras on with our dogs, our cats, our family. Because in this way, human community will be built. So all these things can be developed. You can't presume in an hour to say, here's how to do it. But we start a conversation by saying, what is it we want to do? So I'm going to open it to the floor because we have a number of experts here and many, many people testing and trying things. And in the balancing act between decisiveness, clarity, and certainty, and autonomy and freedom, it is our collective job to find a pathway for a troubled period of time for humans to feel safe and to belong in teams, in organisations, collaborating. And as somebody just said to me, I think it was Michelle in Sydney from Claim Central Consolidated, can we possibly find joy again? Can we find joy in our work? And the answer is most definitely, yes, we can. So you have two spots you can contribute to. You can start chatting, and we're going to monitor the chat room, but you can put your hand up. You can put your hand up and you can say, I want to add something to this. Here's what we're doing. For anyone speaking, we're going to ask you to keep your comment to no more than a minute, but let's see what you have to say about what you're noticing, what you're trialing, what you're fearing, what you're hoping for in teams. So anyone can stick at the, okay, we go to Cheng Yao.
Hi, Fabian. I just wanted to add, I think we have to show, like, you know, as leaders, we need to live it. So whatever it is, whatever our reality is, not be afraid to show it. I mean, I was in an interview last week where I was made very clear, at any point in time, my 10-year-old is going to come home, and I've put a note on the door saying, please do not come in. This is a very important meeting, but he might just barge in, right? So that was the beginning of an interview with the CIO of an organization. So, you know, it's, I think we have to be like, work happens in the context of life, you know, and especially when you work from home, it's not all about work. In between, you do other things, and I think we need to just show it as leaders that we have families too.
Let's take that great one-liner. Leaders need to learn how to show what's actually happening for them. For women, by the way, that can be relatively easy. For men, as a generalization, it can feel quite threatening, because I had a model of leadership where I was meant to know what to do. And as the great Brené Brown has said, vulnerability underpins the building of trust. You can't hide what you're feeling, even though you think you can. And by not sharing that, what people begin to think is they hallucinate what's actually happening with you, and they are frequently wrong. Thank you, Cheng. Who else would like to contribute something on stage? Just put your thumbs up if something's happening in your organisation, in your sector. You've noticed something. I can see Stephen Lynch, you're here. You're doing amazing things.
Babe, I might just share something. Oh, sorry.
Go on, where you go.
I might just share something out of the chat, Babe.
Yes,
Alison Dodds has posted that one of the things that's really important is the language that we use.
Great.
When we talk about returning to the office as opposed to returning to work. That was something that she raised, which I think a lot of people have commented on and agreed with.
Perfect. So it's not a return to work, and it's not a return to the office.
Yeah.
It is, where am I going to work today? And in fact, which environment is most conducive for the task I have?
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, pre-COVID, open plan offices were generating huge inefficiencies. And for anyone with a reflective predisposition, they found those offices hideous to work in. Homework has provided concentrated reflective space where I get more into the flow. Workspace is where I can collaborate and create. So it is actually reusing the language around where I work versus what I'm doing, and why would I choose to be in this space or that space. There's also another one around the language we use. Language shows up in 1,000 different ways in tiny increments, and I'm constantly helping leaders think about the language they're using. Are you creating calmness or fear?
Yeah.
Are you creating inclusion or hierarchy? Are you creating a sense of trust or distrust just in the words you use? So language is critically important. Thank you, Liz. What else is turning up in chat?
Could I just
Yes.
piggyback off the returning to work versus returning to the office? And I'd be interested to know what others are seeing, but I'm seeing a disappointing number of organisations that are being quite directive about returning to the office. and directive in as much as they're not being consultative. There's no, I mean, I have a passion for a consultative style of organisation in which, because it's going to be a hard conversation. Let's not pretend it's going to be easy, but leaders who put off the conversation. I know of an organisation at 4:30 on Friday afternoon last week sent out a directive to staff. You will be at the office from 9 to 5 from Monday.
Great.
It's cowardice, but it's...
That's a crucially important point, Simon. And the leaders that are doing that are doing it out of fear or misguided hierarchical judgment. It will not work. It will not work. Simple as that. What will happen is good people will leave first. It also, often you see the leadership age group behind this behaviour, and you're seeing people in their 50s and 60s who are deeply disconnected from people who go, this is easy to do. I can be here or I can be here, depends on the task, and who are not comfortable with technology. Now, the flip side of that is, how do we help? Because we also know a very interesting thing, that CEOs are probably struggling most. They like the company, the sound of interaction, the engagement of different thought processes, and they're getting very isolated. So if you are 30 or under, you have a mastery of technology that if you're 50 and over, you are unlikely to have. We have to have an adopt an oldie campaign, teach people over 50 how to use the technology because they're not using it effectively. So thank you, Simon. Someone else.
Sorry, Fabe, one from the chat. Michelle Greco has shared with us, thanks Michelle, that one initiative that's worked really well is getting their team in on Tuesdays as part of seeing each other in person. That's the one day that they meet, they connect, they all sign up to, and it's working really well for them. And that's, Michelle, you're at the Australian Grand Prix Corporation, is that right? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Beautiful. So Michelle, where did the idea come from? How did you arrive at it?
It was actually asking the team in terms of what they want, and they did still want to connect in person, which was brilliant. So it was something that really evolved from the team in terms of feedback, and it's something that we've been doing for quite a few months now, and it is working well. And in fact, they're all in today. So we're catching up at 1 o'clock, and it's one of those days that, not to say it's not negotiable, but they really look forward to connecting in person, which is good.
Fabulous. Hands up anyone else who's been doing that, setting to a couple of days or one day in the week where you're asking or hoping people come back. Okay, let's hear Sally Wallace. Is it working for you?
Yeah, it's totally optional. Nothing's mandated at all. And often we do it around food because we love to get together and eat. So we have fortnightly Thursday lunches, but sort of, either all together or out at restaurants or smaller groups to connect with people outside your team. And it works really well.
Brilliant. So having fun, food, making it worth coming back to an office, not just transporting what we do at home into a traditional office space, but actually making creatively these spaces quite different focus of attention. Hands up anyone else who's got a day or 2 days where you're getting people back in? Cheng's doing it. Let's see who else we've got doing it. Okay, Robert, how's it working for you?
It's got varied results, Fabian. I'm sort of coming in nearly 5 days a week because I just personally enjoy the interaction I have with people. Working from home can be pretty tiresome, I find. If you're not distracted by the washing or what are you going to have for dinner, then it's just more productive. I think it's more productive in an office scenario. We encourage the assessors to come back in, or the staff to come back in as often as they can. There's no mandate, which is great, but at the same time, we're sort of trying to justify, a large building space with half a dozen people in it. So it's a challenge from that point of view, Fabian. But we're continuing to work with it. We're continuing to encourage, just verbally through meetings that we have online. Guys, feel free to come in. It's a good environment, and the food thing is probably a really good bait that we can throw out there for people to come in. And we've got a few chefs around here, so it doesn't hurt. to.
So, Robert, how many people are you referring to, and what company or sector are you in?
So it's VetAssess here in the city. Yeah, VetAssess, and we do skills assessments. In our department, the trades department, we have anywhere up to 30 to 40 people that that can come in on the floor. And currently we have 7. So
let me tell you something very interesting. I love VetAssess and I know the organisation pretty well. And this is a terrible horse pill we have to swallow. They will never come back in the way it was, and our world will keep interrupting them even if they do.
Yep.
We have to pay attention to what science is telling us. It'll never go back to the way it was. Therefore, wonderful leaders like yourself have to say, how do we change this? How do we reinvent it? No matter how much we encourage people, as soon as they're back in, something will happen, as is happening in Australia right now. The advice will be go back home. Go back home. So we have to work out what is the answer. And you've hit a very, very sensitive little raw spot for senior leaders, and that is, my God, we have this overhead. We have this building and it's costing us a king's ransom. We just redid the offices and they're beautiful. It's a wonderful office space. How do we justify this? Well, there is a challenge. And I often saying to leaders, let's creatively think tank what that might look like in a quite different world. What's the wildest idea we have for what can happen with our office spaces that will A, make it more attractive to our people, B, will amortize or shift the weight of the cost burden, because it's a very real cost burden. And that was a very big discussion in Helsingborg in the conference I was at, because these are councils from across Europe, 1,500 CEOs, all battling the phenomenon of this incredible city space, which it's amazing what they're doing with their city space to take it away from being where people come back to work. Okay, I'm going to ask you a second question now. What I'd like to know from amongst you is, how are you feeling about collaboration? What are you noticing is working or not working in inspiring or managing collaboration, both within teams but across functions or stakeholders? So can we get an observation from across the room? What's happening with collaboration? Anyone can pop up a thumb. Okay, we go to Catherine Weller.
Yeah, so I think our collaboration has got much better. We work with lots of young people, and we have 600 year 11s on Discord. We can message them instantly. We get they did 34,000 messages between each other in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And it's given a whole lot of people who wouldn't normally be able to collaborate chances to collaborate with each other. So that's the chronically ill, neurodiverse people, people with work commitments. Suddenly they can log in at a time that.
So Catherine, pause a moment. We'll get a bit more meat on the bone from you. Talk about your organisation first. Who are you?
Sure. We're at the National Youth Science Forum. So we bring together about 650 year 11 students between year 11 and 12 over the summer. And they're our future leaders in science, technology, engineering, and maths. So we bring them science outside the classroom and tell them it's basically homeward bound, I kind of say, but for 17-year-olds, and we don't take them to Antarctica.
And how many staff do you have?
15 staff, and
15 staff.
They're pretty much all under 30, or in their 30s or under 30, yeah.
And now tell us what creatively you did to get them collaborating.
Yeah, so we do a lot of, between us and the team, we do a lot of Slack, and that's instant messaging, but it can be asynchronous as well. So you log in at a time that's useful to you. Some people will start their day at 8 in the morning and finish at 4, 9 to 6 and different hours, but there'll always be a message there that you can see and reply to later without clogging someone's inbox. So Slack has been really good. We do days synchronously, a Miro. So that's an online whiteboard where we bring together everyone, putting Post-it notes everywhere. And what's changed from previously in person is that sometimes those days might only have been for senior management, but now we've got lots of junior people coming in and putting that down their ideas, because why not? They might have fantastic ideas, and they do have fantastic ideas. And so it's democratized how we make decisions. By being able to collaborate online.
So here's a couple of really important things from Catherine's comment. The National Youth Forum is deeply purposeful. It brings kids together in summer for summer programs, 600 kids. So it's a purposeful, values-aligned organisation. So it's starting with the building blocks of true creative collaboration. It then has an age group that is helping with technology. So there are people in this room I know will not know about Slack or Miro. So those are just two of the tools that can be used. But when I say instigate and adopt an oldie program, I'm not joking. It's about getting people 25 or 30 and under to be partnered with people 50 and over, or 45 and over, to make them feel comfortable with technology. Now, that age group, by the way, are the worst teachers on the planet. They're short-tempered, intolerant, speak too quickly, and aren't taught how to teach. And of course, they're working with an age group who go, I have no idea how to work the television remote. So the void in skill is massive. And what's happening is the TV remote is being snatched back, or the mobile phone's being snatched back. Here, let me do it for you. That's going to create an IT vacuum between generations. In Catherine's organisation, they're breaking that boundary down. And the thing that helps is if our purpose and our values in a small team or a large across are actually aligned. I'm going to turn to Liz. What's turning up in the chat room, Liz?
Yeah, we've got some really interesting things here, Fabe. One of the things David Old, thank you very much, David, has mentioned around one stress point that they have is that team members prioritise personal needs over the team needs constantly. Pre-pandemic, the rhythm was that personal priorities didn't override the team as often. And now we have, it doesn't work for me, prevailing in that narrative.
Oh, that's a lovely hot potato. Hands up or thumbs up on your reactions button. You can put a thumbs up if you're seeing a little bit of that happening. It's I over us. Can we get a show of thumbs up? Can you use the 1, 2, 3? Oh, plenty of you. All right, you're not going to like my answer. When I prevails over we, it's because I don't see where who I am really fits. I prevails over we when there is not the loyalty to the team or the organisation. The purpose of what we do is not really intimately felt. Now, I'm going to say that as a generalisation, and I would be saying to a group, go back to first basics. My practical advice is you get people together and you say, we have noticed that. And we respect this is a complex time for my needs, your needs, our needs. How do we manage this? What is our best way to manage this? And you let go of answering that question. It must be answered by the people for the people. And our job as leaders is to synthesize the responses and to experiment, because there's no clear pathway. If we are values aligned and we belong to each other, I will make sure I'm doing what works for us. But the other side of it is we are in the middle of a massive emotional upheaval. People are anxious, they're unwell, they're fearful, they're divided, and their families rightly are coming first. Then we ask ourselves, how do we make sure that's acknowledged, recognised, and managed in collaboration? Have we got any recommendations from the audience? How do you cope with that phenomenon? How have you been dealing with that? There's that beautiful hair.
I think, I'm not sure that we're necessarily doing it across the whole organization, but I also tell the team that part of my job is to actually make sure that those who are new to the organization have the connections to kind of like have a network around them, because a lot of people started during COVID and they've never actually met anyone in real life. So right. It's also the need to balance those who are seeking, people who've been around the organization a while, they're seeking their networks or the experience. It's also about, acknowledging
Jen,
that.
can you just share with people who you work for?
Oh, sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Cheng. I work for Australia Post. I am
So
the
this
head of
is a
strategy.
huge organisation. So the focus is on Cheng with a new team is establishing connections. There's a good piece of advice to everyone. If you started in COVID, you don't have those connections. We went straight into task. We did nothing to build the cultural alignment or engagement. And our ratio, by the way, is probably 8 activities around culture, engagement and networking to 2 around task. But it's actually 1 around culture to 9 around task. So we start to think carefully. Sage, I see you nodding.
Yeah, thanks so much, Fabian. One of the things that we've implemented, I suppose, learning from the initial COVID kind of first year, was building it into our kind of people and culture framework. So attitudes around how we connect, how we collaborate, and linking that to people's roles. And then part of our performance measurement. So it's really embedded. Leaders and managers are accountable as well because it's part of our roles and position descriptions.
Can you, Sage, tell us who you work for again?
I work for the Early Learning Association of Australia.
And how many staff?
We've got 19 staff and a huge amount of, I suppose, turnover in the last 2 years, like so many people. But we're seeing, you know, we've had our cultural framework in place for about 12 months, and our new recruits come in and they get that this is, you know, this is the standard that we expect of everyone. And some of the people that have been with us for longer we can see the change in both from the values base, but also how they're connecting with the newness, how they're engaging with the technology that we need to facilitate this hybrid environment. So it's pretty phenomenal.
So can I quick question for you? How many people do you serve? How many people or organisations do the 19 serve?
Close to 1,500 early childhood providers in Victoria with tens of people in those organisations. So thousands of engagements.
So just everyone be conscious how big the organisation actually is. And I would say to everyone, as we horrifically run out of time, that we have a lot to learn from what small organisations are doing, even when we're in very big organisations, because what small organisations are doing is creating empowerment in small teams. So if you want high-level collaboration and you're in a big organisation, you have to chunk down to the circle of control, not talk about organisation-wide initiatives because they're too cumbersome, too slow, too hierarchical, too complex. You can role model what entrepreneurs or small businesses are doing and you can replicate it in teams. You can look at what is happening in the creative arts or innovation sector. You can look at what IT organisations are doing to create creative collaboration in small teams. And I'm going to use Cheng and Sage's comments to segue into the final thing. A quick dump from you in the chat room. What skills of leadership do we need, will we need in the next decade to enable us to transfer common sense into common practice? So when I say ready, set, go, just write down what are the capabilities you think leaders must be able to grasp, demonstrate it, live, that will take us, I'm not talking management, I'm talking leadership, into the next decade. Ready, set, go. Brilliant. See what's emerging. Empathy, emotional intelligence, resilience, curiosity, listening. It's not just this audience. This is the common sense we're talking about. And when you get a leadership capability model, almost none of that is on it. So we are also saying we have to redevelop the whole approach to leadership capability. So we will synthesize this amazing conversation. This is just the start. Give us a thumbs up if it was worth you all being here. Good. 2 thumbs up. Thank you, Sally. Hugely important, and it's a complex conversation. The August program will be a panel of people who will bring the skills. We might even shoulder tap some of you. Come back for this conversation, because we will start with the leadership capabilities, because in the end, that is the single biggest leverage point we've all got. It is in the hands of leaders to adapt and change now, not tomorrow. We're investing millions, billions of dollars in trying to respond to the issues that are confronting humanity. And we're spending $1.50 on leadership capability development. We need to address this as a matter of urgency, and that's where we will start the conversation in the next session. Real-time case studies, real-time conversations with you, the real-time audience. Huge thanks to you all for being here. Thank you to the DATNA Group team behind the scenes, to Sarah, to Em, to Liz, to Hannah. We will stay by your side, and you will hear from us very soon, and we will synthesize this conversation so you walk away with the insights and wisdom of the crowd. Love to you all. Have a fabulous balance of your week.